As the siege of Eger stretched into its later stages, confidence within the Ottoman command began to erode. What had started as a campaign expected to end in swift victory slowly transformed into a test of endurance, logistics, and leadership. Ottoman commanders, observing continued resistance from within the fortress, increasingly suspected that reinforcements had arrived in Eger, an assumption that reshaped their strategic calculations. The belief that fresh troops had entered the fortress did not emerge from a single report, but from a pattern of observations. Movement along the walls remained constant. Cannon fire continued despite weeks of bombardment. Loud singing and visible organization suggested high morale. For Ottoman leaders, these signs conflicted sharply with earlier intelligence indicating that Eger's defenders were near exhaustion. This uncertainty proved costly. Siege warfare depended heavily on accurate assessments of an enemy's strength and resolve. If Eger truly had been reinforced, a continued assault would risk further heavy losses without guaranteed success. The possibility alone forced Ottoman commanders to pause, reassess, and debate their next steps. At the same time, pressures outside the fortress walls intensified. Ottoman supply lines, stretched across long distances, were increasingly vulnerable. Feeding and equipping a large army deep in contested territory required constant movement of provisions. As the siege dragged on, the strain on logistics became impossible to ignore. Food shortages began to affect Ottoman camps. While not as severe as conditions inside Eger, reduced rations weakened soldiers and lowered morale. Foraging parties were sent farther from camp, exposing them to attacks and increasing logistical risk. The longer the siege continued, the more fragile the supply network became. Losses also mounted steadily. Repeated assaults on the fortress had already resulted in thousands of casualties. Artillery crews, infantry units, and engineers all suffered from sustained combat and disease. Each failed attack reduced the number of experienced soldiers available for future operations. Medical facilities within the Ottoman camp struggled to cope with the wounded. Field hospitals were crowded, and recovery rates slowed as resources were diverted to sustain the ongoing siege. Disease spread among tightly packed troops, further increasing non-combat losses. Weather added to the growing list of concerns. Autumn was advancing, and signs of approaching winter became more apparent each day. Cold nights, rain, and muddy terrain complicated movement and reduced efficiency. Ottoman commanders were well aware that winter campaigns posed serious risks, particularly when supply lines were already under strain. Historically, winter had often proven more dangerous than the enemy itself. Frozen roads, reduced forage, and illness could cripple even the strongest armies. Continuing the siege into colder months risked turning a difficult campaign into a disaster. Within the Ottoman leadership, debates intensified. Some commanders argued that Eger must fall eventually and that persistence would bring victory. Others warned that continued assaults would only deepen losses and weaken the army's ability to defend existing territories. Reports from scouts and prisoners remained contradictory. Some suggested that the defenders were on the brink of collapse. Others claimed the fortress remained well-manned and prepared for prolonged resistance. This conflicting information fueled uncertainty at the highest levels of command. Psychological pressure played a key role in shaping Ottoman doubts. The failure to break Eger, despite superior numbers, challenged long-held assumptions about Ottoman military dominance. Soldiers began to question why victory remained elusive against a fortress that should, by all calculations, have already fallen. Morale in the camp suffered as days passed without progress. Confidence gave way to frustration, and frustration to fatigue. Rumors spread among the ranks of hidden defenders, secret supplies, and unexpected reinforcements. Such rumors, whether true or not, weakened discipline and cohesion. The cost-benefit balance of the siege shifted steadily. Each additional day required more supplies, more manpower, and more risk, while the prospect of decisive victory grew less certain. Commanders were forced to consider whether holding position at Eger justified the sacrifices being made. Strategically, the Ottoman Empire faced broader responsibilities beyond Eger. Armies were needed elsewhere to secure borders, suppress resistance, and maintain control over newly conquered territories. Prolonged commitment to a single fortress, limited flexibility, and stretched resources across the wider campaign. The illusion of strength created within Eger amplified Ottoman doubts. Visible confidence from the defenders undermined assumptions of weakness. The inability to confirm the true condition of the garrison made every decision more dangerous. As winter approached, the urgency to act increased. Either the fortress would need to be taken quickly, or the army would have to withdraw to preserve strength. Delay itself became a liability. In the end, pressure did not come from a single factor, but from the accumulation of many. Rising casualties, uncertain intelligence, logistical strain, declining morale, and the threat of winter combined to erode Ottoman confidence. What had once appeared to be a straightforward conquest turned into a costly stalemate. The siege of Eger thus entered a decisive phase defined not by battlefield action alone, but by doubt and calculation. Ottoman commanders faced a difficult choice: risk everything for a victory that might never come, or preserve their forces by abandoning the siege. For historians, this moment highlights the limits of military power when faced with uncertainty and endurance. The Ottoman Empire remained a formidable force, yet even the strongest armies could be slowed and sometimes stopped by resilience, deception, and the unforgiving realities of prolonged warfare. As the days grew colder and the situation more complex, one fact became clear. The siege of Eger was no longer just a test of walls and weapons, but a test of judgment under pressure.